So I'll give you the long story short right now before we get deeply into it. So artificial intelligence and the human soul, or humans themselves, are different things by nature. So that's the first thing you have to understand. So this is Sophia, a human-like artificial intelligence robot. We'll talk about her later. We'll show a video. This is also like an artificial intelligence illustration, and this is a human person. So they're separate things. So you already from the beginning shouldn't be thinking about them as the same thing. So what I'll do is I'll demystify what. Welcome. So I'll demystify what artificial intelligence really is, because people don't know what it is or how to think about it. It's a big mystery to them, but it doesn't have to be. You don't have to be scared to kind of understand it. And I'll give you like all the knowledge that you need in order to understand how it works and how it really functions, so that you know that the nature of it and how it's a different thing from humans themselves. So artificial intelligence, what is it? What really is it? How does it work? So let's start with traditional software, which has been around for over 50 years. So in traditional software, you have a programmer at a computer, and he gives the computer rules that he explicitly types out onto the computer, and then he gives it an input, and then with those two things that the computer got from the programmer, the computer can output some output, some result or decision. It could be anything. Say you have like some image, and you can ask it, does this image have a lot of red areas or a lot of blue areas? And you can write out explicit rules to count how many red pixels there are, or how many blue pixels there are. And the computer can just output something from that very simply with the correct answer, with simple rules that the programmer explicitly programmed into the computer. So that's traditional software. But when you get to artificial intelligence, it gets more complex a little bit, and it's like software, but it's more advanced. So instead of rules being typed out by the programmer, count the number of red pixels, etc. What happens instead is that you have data that you've collected from some data set that just exists in the world, and that you can use it. So the data, you put it into the computer, and you also have some inputs, which is what the AI engineer tweaks into the computer, so that the computer knows what to do with the data and how to interpret it, and how to get the correct answer. So once you give both of these things into the computer, you get the rules as an output. So this is the first step. So the rules are actually an output here, rather than the input that's explicitly stated by the programmer. And then you go to the next step, and the rules are actually an input. I know we're getting into a lot of details. This is actually not super necessary, but just so you have an idea, and I will give some illustrations later. So the rules are now like part of the computer. It knows what they are. They don't have to be programmed in. And then you can give the computer an input, like a new image, for example, and it will give you a correct answer, just like software was giving you a correct answer, but now it can do a lot more things because it was trained on data that made it more intelligent. Okay, so let's talk about some actual examples. So these are good examples to know. So we have self-driving cars, language translation like Google Translate, cancer diagnosis, and deepfake videos, or videos that are generated artificially and they're fake, and they can be made to look like anybody's doing anything basically, or anybody's saying anything. You know, that can get very dangerous. So in all of these examples, the computer is intelligent enough to do these things because you fed it data in order for it to understand how to interpret the input that it's getting. So in the case of self-driving cars, you feed it a lot of data. For example, this is a car in front of you, and you know, if you know it's there, then you're not going to accelerate. You're not going to drive into it. Or a person walking in front of you, or a cat, or an old lady, or anything like that. So this is all data. So that makes the computer more intelligent, so that later when you're driving, you know, it's seeing the road, and that's new data, and then it knows what to do when it sees this new data. It can actually recognize a car, an old lady, or whatever it's looking at. With language translation, the data you have is basically like data of text from different languages, and once the computer sees enough of those, then you can translate from one language to another. Cancer diagnosis is a similar thing. You have data of images of cancer. Once the computer sees enough of data like that, then it knows how to distinguish cancer and not cancer, and it can do a diagnosis. And then deepfake, in this case, this is Obama giving a speech, and this is actually, the computer is like made intelligent enough to do this by basically looking at 6 hours or even more, like 8 hours of footage of Obama giving speeches. And once it does that enough, it can actually, you know, learn how to translate text that you type in into movements that he's making with his mouth into images.
So when you say that the computer sees enough data, if I understood that correctly, it's like, so if you give the computer like 10 examples of something, it's different than giving it 1,000,000 examples of something. Is that really the difference here?
Yes, exactly, yes.
So
the more data you give it, the more intelligent it's going to be, and the better it does its job.
Better quality of reproduction.
Yeah, right. Better output accuracy.
Someone was telling me that because Google has so much data, their text recognition is more accurate, let's say, than Amazon, because they have so much more data.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes their computer like more real or more intelligent in that sense, more able to translate voice to text.
Yeah.
So why is that? Is it why does more mean better?
So when you have more data, the more data that you have, that means the more examples it will see of what's correct and what's incorrect. So if you have one sentence translated into another, it can learn a few rules to go from one language to the other. And if you have maybe 10 sentences, it can learn a few more rules. But if you have millions and millions of sentences of text, which is the size that these data sets get into, then it learns like a whole variety of rules, and the internal knowledge it has of these systems is so advanced that it's very, very good at translating from one language to the other.
So applying that to the self-driving car, if you only show the computer 10 types of cars, then it sees something on the road that's different than those 10. It may not know that that's a car. It may think it's something else. But if you give the computer,
or it may not
millions
see a car, for example.
It may not see a car. So, but if you tell it, no, there's actually hundreds and thousands of type of cars, and here's the list of them, here's all of them, then when it sees something, it can scan that whole list and say, oh yeah, I've seen that's a car. That's the idea. Okay. Thank you.
Is the same then true about
Exactly.
incorrect data example, or is it just based on more good examples it will learn incorrect ones?
The same is true, yes, for incorrect data, because it's basically looking at a cascade of filters all over the image and saying, is it a car or is it not a car? Or is it a person or is it not a person? And so it either says it's a car or it's not a car. And it has a probability attached to it. So it might say, I'm 80% sure it's a car, but only when it's above 90%, then you'll say that, yeah, this is a car, and let's decide this is a car, and then let's not drive toward it, and let's be careful around this car. So let's watch a video of Sophia, the human-like robot. It'll give you an example of another application of artificial intelligence. So just like we said with self-driving cars with language translation, these are all applications of artificial intelligence. And when you put them together, you might get something like Sophia, which is advanced, and it can listen to you, and it can generate things, and it can listen to emotions, and it can speak, it can generate voice as well. So
People actually tried meeting.
This year we got creative with our dollar.
People tried meeting Sophia after this video of Jimmy Fallon. Like they all were trying to go viral.
But with Walmart's low prices, you'd still know how to do it up and keep costs down.
Can you maximize the video size?
Let's end the year enjoying more.
Brought a friend with you here, and this is really kind of freaking me out.
Yeah, this is
You the light?
Sophia. And Sophia is a social robot, and she has artificial intelligence software that we've developed at Hanson Robotics, which can process visual data. She can see people's faces, she can process conversational data, emotional data, and use all of this to form relationships with people.
Okay, so, I mean, she's basically alive, is that what you're saying?
Oh, yeah. She is basically alive. Would you like to maybe give it a try?
Sure.
Give it.
I'll just say, what's, it's just like, you see how awkward my first dates are? It's a robot. Oh, I'm getting nervous around a robot, a very pretty robot. What do I just say hello to?
Yeah.
Hi, Sophia.
Hello, Jimmy.
Oh my God. Do you know where you are?
Of course. I'm in New York City, and I'm on my favorite show, The Tonight Show.
Sophia, can you tell me a joke?
Sure. What cheese can never be yours?
Cheese can never be mine. I don't know.
Nacho cheese.
I like nacho cheese.
Nacho cheeses. Ew.
Ew.
I'm getting laughs.
I don't get that.
Maybe I should host the show.
Okay, all right. Stay in your lane, girl. No.
Jimmy, would you like to play a game of rock, paper, scissors, robot style?
Sure.
Okay, let's get this game going.
Let's stop there.
That's pretty scary, actually. So, like, I think long-term, like, future of generations of kids, and like the kids become youth, and the youth become young professionals, and the young professionals become parents, and then the parents become having kids. I mean, we're facing now a struggle as parents in general, and young professionals, and youth, and kids. Everything is so tech, like 2-year-old kids are tech savvy more than the parents. And everything's like, there's no family time, like, amongst the kids, or like family time, everyone's on their phones. So I can't even imagine seeing a robot within the family just because like you're lazy, you don't want to talk to an actual human.
A robot in the family.
So it's pretty scary. Like, even within the hospital, everything's like robot. Like, there's a robot machine that has like a pharmacy, like a shelf of all the drugs.
Yeah,
It
I
tells,
agree.
like,
It's scary.
as much as
scary how much text there is.
it's nice to have, but it's also very scary. like data-wise.
And I think this is why this talk is so important, because when the tech is trying to make robots human-like,
Yeah.
so much so that maybe in the future it'll be hard to distinguish if something's a robot or a person.
Mm-hmm.
So for us to know
Yeah.
these things and think about them in advance before they happen will perhaps influence the ethics by which these things are
Yeah, and
governed.
robots are man-made. It's not like it's a God-created natural being. Like,
Right,
so-
and we can't, and if our kids, like you're saying, substitute virtual things for real things, then we get into other problems, absolutely.
yeah.
Okay, so basically you just saw an artificial intelligence example. There's many others, and there's going to be more in the future. But there's a philosophical and theological, both you can say either philosophical or theological. There's a philosophical and theological point that's very important about the difference between artificial intelligence and humans in general, which is you might imagine if an artificial intelligence or a robot is acting just like us, just like a human being, you know, it does everything we do. Is it just the same as us? It seems to have feelings. It seems to have thoughts, beliefs, values. It can do anything we can do. So the question is it, does it have a soul? Does it have consciousness? Does it have free will? All these questions. So the answer is no. It doesn't have those things. So even though it might fool you, so the new word that's important to know is this word called qualia. This word, so everything can be mimicked by an artificial intelligence, right? But in the end, no matter what happens, you can't really program it. That an AI can't have qualia, which is what it feels like to really be a human. The best way to describe this is what it's like to see something red, or what it's like to smell apple pie. So when you look at the color red or the color blue, you know what it's like, and you know you can't really explain it, but you know blue when you see it. It's that kind of feeling. Same thing when you're smelling something. You can kind of describe it, but the taste, the sensation, or the feeling of it is something that you can't really pass on. It's hard to try, really. You can't force someone to understand it without trying it and feeling it. And that's what qualia is. So it's an important concept to understand, because this is what tells us that artificial intelligence is not the same as humans. It doesn't have qualia, which it's like, this is our evidence. So it's also the case that AI doesn't have consciousness and it doesn't have free will. So these things follow from not having qualia. So this is the distinction between humans and artificial intelligence. You have a question?
So is this quality the same thing as quality of life used for research in human? So is this quality of life for AI?
No, it's not the same as quality of life. So again, robots don't feel, so there's quality of life for humans, that's important, but there's no quality of life for robots. They don't feel, so you know, there's no rules for how to treat them right. However, you should treat them right, because you don't want to live in a world where everybody's like mistreating robots. You know, this is kind of just like a bad culture for people to learn and start to treat things like. That makes sense?
So I feel like Rami's talking like 30 years in the future. He's trying to convince us that robots are not like humans, which to us, we kind of
Already know
that.
Yeah.
But he's, because he lives and breathes this stuff, I think he sees much more than the average person does of what it's. Were you going to say something, Matthew?
I just had a was gonna ask, do you think the programming will ever get to the point or get good enough to recreate or mimic what might be considered a consciousness at some point?
Good question. That's you know, that's a real possibility and possibly then a real danger. So
Because the programming is gonna constantly improve for years and years ahead.
right. That's why this philosophical distinction is important to know, because it might, as you said, get really advanced and get really out of hand. But we know at the end of the day that it's not a human-like free will. It's not free will, because free will needs humanity or a human, and it's not really conscious, and it doesn't really have qualia. So how advanced it gets is a different question from does it have consciousness and does it have free will? And that's a good point, as you said.
So I wanted to ask Rami, maybe off topic, but you know how there was talks about having maybe some sort of chip, according to Bill Gates with the whole vaccine, and some sort of to track where people are going, data with the
Bill Gates or Elon Musk?
It was one of the, I think it was Elon. Yeah, sorry, it was a mistake. Like something like that, that's like I couldn't process that personally, like that mentality. But also if robots don't have, like, why would we have to have chip within our system? Like that's micromanaging, right? Like you're controlling, you want to control the society. You see what I'm saying? Like, so, like what's the need for robots in our society and the future going forward? And that's already scary enough, but they want to control the people and put microchips and everything else within that.
So maybe let's talk about that at the end, because that could get into some other places.
Oh, okay.
But let me get through this first.
Okay, sorry.
And we'll keep going.
Okay.
So what I want to say next is that we've established what qualia is. This is the important thing that you should know to distinguish humans and artificial intelligence. But as I said, as Matthew brought up, how advanced it is different from whether it has free will and consciousness. So it can have various powers to fool you, or to display to you, to make you think that it is actually intelligent. You know, and this is the danger. It can get very advanced. It can just get very powerful. It can get very lifelike or human-like. And I want to mention this thing, self-referencing. So this is one power that it has, which is when it talks about itself a lot. This is one of the biggest tricks that artificial intelligence has to make you think that it's really thinking, that it's like a human person. So just think about it, like if you're talking to another person, or maybe it happens to be a machine, if it's constantly saying like, I feel this way and I've been doing this, I did this yesterday and I've been doing this for years, and now I feel this way, and I've seen people do this, and I'm like this, and I always said this, and I'm saying this, and I really feel this way. Just think about if you keep saying I and keep self-referencing, like that makes you think that it's real. Like that's one of the tricks that people program into artificial intelligence, to make you think that you're really talking to something. Because if you keep self-referencing, you think there's something there, there's something behind that. Do you see what I'm saying? So, an example, you can ask an artificial intelligence system, how are you? And it might use like a probabilistic random chance system to pick one of these. I am fine. It might say, I am spectacular. I am enjoying my day. I love my life. You see? So So I wanted to mention that as an example of why artificial intelligence with this power of self-referencing might fool you or might make you think that it's a human, like with feelings, with qualia, you know? This is like a power or a trick it has. But this is just something that it can do, you know, which is really powerful if it keeps doing it. But you have to remember that even if it does this, you know, it's not really seeing, you know, it doesn't know what it's like to see something red. It's just processing information, it's processing bits, and it doesn't know what it's like to smell apple pie. It's processing information. It doesn't have qualia in the end. So that's an important point. So now we're transitioning to talk about human free will. So now we're talking about humans, not artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence work with data, but then humans, what do we have? We have God-given free will, and it's something we are endowed with from God. He chose to give it to us. Okay. And this is, you know, obviously different from machines and different from artificial intelligence. You know, we have something that they don't have. So we have that power to change our actions and to choose what we do and to change. Whereas artificial intelligence is working off rules that it knows. It might be very advanced again, but it's not the same. It doesn't have consciousness. So we have free will. This is our teaching, and this is, you know, what we believe we have, and we can experience it. We can choose what we want to do, and it comes from God, right? So determinism. This is like a common argument that people have. So many people are determinists, and they believe that everything is, you know, everything is predetermined. So what you do is just determined by, you know, the science of the conditions of the universe beforehand, and so the future is just going to be known ahead of hand. So it's a common argument, determinism. So how do we argue against it? So here's a few arguments we have here, a few counter arguments to determinism. So this first one is really for us to reassure ourselves that we in fact have free will for our own minds. It's more for us than for the determinists. So we can simply observe in our own life. If we act right, very simply, God rewards us. If we act wrong, God chastises or punishes us. We can just observe this by the different choices we have in life. So this determines our life outcomes. If we act one way, something will happen. If we act a different way, something else will happen. And for us, it will determine heaven, hell, eternal life, based on our choices. So this has to do with the afterlife and with eternal life. So that's something that we can observe. So that's how we can have knowledge that we have free will, is that this is something that we observe. You know, very simply, we can just make a choice of how to act, and different things will happen. So that's, you know, that's kind of our internal reassurance that we do in fact have free will. So that's for us. But if we want to give like a really good, strong argument for determinists who think that there's, you know, just everything is predetermined and you just like have no say, even your choices are predetermined. So we can talk about this actually. So these 2 bullet points, you know, are from some reading that I did from, it's one of the latest scientists, like in the last 3 or 5 years. And also one of the top scientists about studying about free will. So his name is Kevin Mitchell, and he does a lot of studying on this, and he writes books and gives talks about this. So I studied him very closely, and so this is essentially the essence, the kernel of his argument. So what we have here is that if you look at science, so determinists are not taking into account that science itself has actually shown with the discovery of quantum mechanics, which is observations on very, very small, parts of, nature or the universe, that there is true indeterminacy in nature, that things can't be predicted, and that things are truly indeterminate, right? So this is the crux of his whole argument, so we'll get through it right now. So the fact that there's true indeterminacy really means that cause and effect, this chain of cause and effect is broken, and it means not every event is an effect, and this is the nice thing he says, or he discovered, something just happened, right? Something just happened, it doesn't have to have a cause, just out of nowhere. This is what we observed with quantum mechanics, which means nature is not like how we think it works with cause and effect, right? So, let's see. Yeah, so this is very interesting. So something just happened. So the key thing is that this may not determine our free will, but it creates room for our free will to occur. So he even says, even if something just happened, it might mean that our choices are just random, right? So that doesn't give us free will, it just means some things are random sometimes, out of nowhere, right? But the important thing is that there's room now, there's room for free will. There's no strict deterministic cause and effect. And so, with that gone, we now have room for free will. There's space for it, right? So how do we get from the quantum world and quarks and all of these really small science things to ourselves? So Kevin Mitchell, he goes from quantum mechanics to neuroscience. I think he's a neuroscientist himself. And he goes into neuroscience and how can we have free will given then the neuroscience and the science of our brains. So he says, great, now we have room for our free will to occur. How can we see that we have free will in our brain? So I'm going to skip this part. This is not necessary right now for this argument, right? But what Kevin Mitchell basically saw was that, if everything is determined by the science of our brain, all our thoughts and values and beliefs and intentions are determined by the science of our brain, right? So how can we have free will if it's all just based on the science of our brain? Well, he says that the meaning of our psychology, everything we think and everything like that, is the psychological meaning is actually inherent in the structure of the brain. In other words, another way of saying that is that we are our brains. So if you have a thought, if you have a belief, if you have an intention, think about it like this. Hi. So it's not caused by the science of the brain, it is the science of the brain. When you have a thought, or a belief, or a feeling, or intention, or something like that, it is the brain itself, doing something. It's the circuits of the brain actually changing, or the neural pathways, taking an action, or doing something, and that is what your thoughts and beliefs are. So it's inherent in the structure itself. So it's not the brain does something and then you do something, it's you are your brain doing something. See, so if you see that makes sense, you see how everything makes sense, and free will can make sense in this framework. And so this is Kevin Mitchell's explanation for this, and he gives this explanation, but he relies on this fact from quantum mechanics that there's true indeterminacy in nature. So his argument doesn't work if there's no indeterminacy in nature. So he saw this, he says, okay, great, now we have a chance to have some room for our free will, some indeterminacy, right? Yeah. And so his statement, psychological meaning is inherent in the structure of the brain. That means if we change ourselves, we can change what we do. Right? If everything is part of our brain and our body as well, because the nervous system is all over the body. If we simply change that, we change what we do, and that means we have a choice in what to do. We have free will of what to do. We can come back to that later if you have questions. Great, so we talked about free will, and we have it, and we have some arguments to back it up with some of the latest scientific studies and research. But let's just think about it from what the Bible tells to us and interpret it from there. So let me read the first one. No temptation has overtaken you except what is common to mankind, and God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. But when you are tempted, He will also provide a way out so that you can endure it. This means that you have the choice to escape from your temptation. So you can a way out, so you endure it, so you can escape from your temptation. But He provides it. You don't have to do it. You can fall into your temptation still, but you have the choice, and God gives it to you. And this is just a point here. I want to say interference. So what that means is that even if God knows ahead of time what you're going to do, it doesn't mean He's going to interfere with what you're going to do. So you're still free in that sense, and that's kind of a paradox that we have to accept. Us Christians, this paradox of interference, because God is omniscient, so He knows what's going to happen. However, He's not going to interfere and make the choice for you. You're still gonna, go ahead and have to make the choice yourself. So, yeah. So it's hard to understand, but we have free will, even though God knows ahead of time. He doesn't make the choice for you in the end. So it's still up to you. Yeah.
Question. You make it silly, but yes, God gave us a choice to pick and choose everything in our life, but in the end, everything's still in His control. He could reveal it to us, or not reveal it to us. So, you see what I'm saying?
Sure,
you could ask and pray for it.
Sure.
But that doesn't mean that it's going to guarantee
God's
God's going to grant it.
God can do different things too.
That's what I'm saying.
And God can do miracles too.
Yeah.
So, He's God. He can just do it.
Everything's in His power.
But generally, so we'll also see later that he made Adam and Eve in His image to have free will. So He intended and gave it to us to have free will. So that was God's choice for us. So that's what He endowed us with. So, even if He changes something or does something different, right? We still have free will generally. I see your point.
Yeah.
Right. So, Yeah, does somebody wanna read this one? Any volunteers? No?
I'll go. See. The second part, all right. This day I call the heavens and the earth as a witness against you that I have set before you life and death, blessings and curses. Now choose life so that you and your children may live, and that you may love the Lord your God. Listen to his voice and hold fast to him, for the Lord is your life, and he will give you many years in the land he swore to give to your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob.
Mm-hmm. So, good. Do you wanna maybe say how that relates to free will?
How this relates to free will is basically that you have a choice, and you know,
Yeah. I have said before you life and death.
yeah, life and death. So life and
Blessings and curses.
yeah, and then basically that's how it relates to free will, and that whichever path you take in life, by discerning the difference between right and wrong, is what's going to determine
Mm-hmm. Right.
your path to either life or to death.
Mm-hmm.
And that's by life and death it means eternal life, or death meaning being in hell.
Or yeah, that you could even also interpret it. I'm just conjecturing here. It could be living close to God, and living away from God.
Yes, that's two.
Right. But exactly, he gave us, eternal life or eternal damnation. So we have the choice. I have set before you the choice, and we'll talk later about actually the exact framework that he gives us for interpreting, following his rules or not, or being close to life or death. So, last quote from the Bible, I'll read this. So, and God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creepeth upon the earth. So he made man God, and he gave him power over all this dominion over all the earth. And the important thing is really the first line, let us make man in our image. So God already has free will. He decided to make us. So yeah, if he made us in his image, then that means like him we have free will, and we have power just like him. So yes, yeah,
And it's clear from the Bible that we are the only creature that was made in the image and likeness of God, and given
Yes.
this special quality of having a spirit. Whereas other living things, they may have like a soul, like they may have life, like an animal, but they don't have what we have, which is a spirit. And to Matthew's point, could the software in the future mimic consciousness and mimic even qualia? And yes, but and I think that's where the theological argument becomes most important. When you have nothing else to differentiate a human from a robot except this God-given spirit, the breath of life, the breath of God, the image and likeness of God, that will be maybe one day the only distinguishing difference.
It's a very prominent topic in science fiction. It's a lot of conflict.
Was that your last slide, or is there more?
There's more. I'll say
Okay.
one thing in response to you. So it may be that before there's an issue of, it mimicking qualia, it may be that before it's just so advanced, it doesn't matter if it has qualia, and it may present dangers to us. Or it might be so powerful that it does things against our interests, or somebody programs a bad robot. So what I'm saying is the priority of how advanced it gets and what it does is more important than the priority of whether it has qualia. this is, the theological point that I'm making, but it's, in terms of practically what happens in the world, it's maybe not the most important thing, actually.
Thank you.
All right, okay. So, so as we said before, oops. So as we said before, it says, I call the heavens and the earth as a witness against you that I have set before you life and death, blessings and curses. We have free will, and God actually tells us the rules that we should follow and what to do, and the framework that we work under in order to live under His what He wants from us. So we have a free will to choose between good and evil, and it's actually nice because we have like a simple framework to know what's good or what's evil. If we want to be good, what can we do? And if we want to be evil, if we want to stray away from God and not follow God, what can we do? So, we have 7 deadly sins: pride, envy, wrath, sloth, greed, gluttony, lust. 7 heavenly virtues: humility, kindness, forgiveness, diligence, charity, temperance, and chastity. So, essentially, this is one thing that comes up in the Bible of what we can follow in order to basically apply our free will to it. And yeah, I just wanted to present this framework because as Christians, I think it's good to understand what we're doing and what's good and what's wrong, and how we actually, if we do have free will, how can we use it for good or evil? So we can actually know what's our virtues and what's our vices, and what's our sins, and what's good things that we can do. So just to end the talk now, I want to give a quote from one of the founders of artificial intelligence, whose name is Alan Turing, the fathers of artificial intelligence. He was, working on it like 50 years ago, in a slightly different way than artificial intelligence is today. He was doing different stuff with computers than what we're doing today with artificial intelligence. But he was working philosophically in artificial intelligence and doing different things. He made the Turing test, which is a test for testing if a computer you can distinguish it from a human. So it's a test to see if it's good enough to, fool you into being a human, right, as we talked about, right? So he said this very cute quote about artificial intelligence. He said, if a machine is expected to be infallible, it cannot also be intelligent. And to me, infallibility is kind of a reference to our own consciousness and our own qualia and our own free will, because we're imperfect humans, and we're fallen humans, and we have fallible consciousness. Which means we have a consciousness that can make mistakes, and so it's like he's referring to, actually our intelligence comes from the fact that we are fallible. So to him, intelligence really requires consciousness and human consciousness and human qualia. Yeah. So that's the talk.